We think we know our history. We read about the Romans, the Egyptians, the Greeks. Their stories are written down. We can read their words, their laws, their poems, but what if we're only reading a fraction of the story? What if entire civilizations, huge and complex, have been silenced? They left us messages, thousands of them. They are carved in stone, stamped in clay, painted on pottery. We see them, we can touch them, but we cannot read them. They are written in lost languages, in codes we have yet to break. If we could read them, our history books would need to be rewritten. The timeline of human thought, of civilization itself, could shift by thousands of years. Who were the first people to write? Where did they live? What did they think was important enough to record forever? We don't know. We can only guess. These silent scripts hold the answers. They are the biggest intellectual puzzles left for us to solve. And solving even one could change everything. Number 15, what did 5 million people say for 1,000 years? Imagine a civilization larger than ancient Egypt and Mesopotamia combined. It stretched over 1 million square kilometers across what is now Pakistan and India. It had more than 1,000 cities and towns. The largest, like Mohenjo-Daro and Harappa, were marvels of urban planning. They had grid-like streets, advanced water management systems, and multi-story brick houses. This was the Indus Valley Civilization, and it flourished for more than a millennium, from about 2600 to 1900 BC. 5 million people lived there, and they wrote things down. We just have no idea what they said. The writing they left behind is called the Indus script. We have about 4,000 examples of it. They are not grand inscriptions on palace walls or long narratives on papyrus. Instead, they are tiny. Most are found on small square seals made of soapstone. Others are on pottery or small tablets. The average inscription is only 5 symbols long. The longest is a mere 17. This is the first and biggest problem. It is hard to decipher a language from fragments. It would be like trying to understand English by only reading people's initials. The symbols themselves are beautiful and complex. There are about 400 unique signs. Some look like fish, birds, or people. Others are geometric shapes. They are often accompanied by images of animals, especially a creature that looks like a unicorn. We do not know if the script reads right to left or left to right. Most scholars, like the Finnish researcher Asko Parpola, believe it was written from right to left based on how the symbols are sometimes cramped on the left side of a seal, as if the writer was running out of space. Parpola has spent his life trying to crack the code. He is a leading proponent of the idea that the underlying language belongs to the Dravidian family, which is still spoken by hundreds of millions of people in southern and central India. He points to a symbol that looks like a fish. The Dravidian word for fish, min, also sounds like the word for star. Maybe he suggests the fish symbol means star. This kind of rebus principle, where a picture represents a sound, is how many ancient scripts worked. But this is just a very compelling theory. We have no proof. The main reason we cannot crack the Indus script is the lack of a Rosetta Stone. The original Rosetta Stone, found in 1799, had the same text written in 3 scripts: Greek, Demotic, and Egyptian hieroglyphs. Since we could read Greek, we could use it to figure out the hieroglyphs. We have nothing like that for the Indus script. No bilingual text has ever been found. The Indus people traded with Mesopotamia. We have found Indus seals in modern-day Iraq, but we have never found an object with both Indus and cuneiform script on it. This has led some researchers to a radical conclusion. In 2004, a paper by Steve Farmer, Richard Sproat, and Michael Witzel argued that the Indus script is not writing at all. They claim it is not a system for representing a spoken language. Instead, they suggest the symbols are more like the symbols found in heraldry or religious iconography. They are non-linguistic signs that identify a family, a clan, a god, or a trade good. They point to the extreme brevity of the inscriptions. No other ancient writing system consists only of such short strings of symbols. They argue that a true writing system would have been used for longer texts, like letters or administrative records, but we have found none. This idea is hugely controversial. Many scholars, including Asko Parpola, strongly disagree. They argue that the symbols show a clear structure and repeat in patterns that look like grammar. Computers have been used to analyze these patterns. One study in 2009 by Rajesh Rao, a computer scientist, showed that the sequence of Indus symbols had a degree of randomness that was different from non-linguistic systems but similar to known language-based scripts. It looks like writing. It probably is writing. So what could it tell us? It could tell us everything. Who were these people? We call them the Indus Valley Civilization because they lived near that river, but what did they call themselves? What were the names of their great cities? The seals with the unicorn and other animals, are these the names of gods? The fish symbol, is it a god, a star, or just the name of a person? The uniformity of the cities suggests a strong central authority, but we have found no palaces, no grand royal tombs. Was this an empire ruled by kings, or a collection of city-states governed by priests or merchant councils? The script could tell us the seals were likely used to stamp clay tags on bundles of goods for trade. The writing could be the names of merchants, the contents of the shipment, or the destination. It could be a record of the vast economic network that stretched to the Persian Gulf. And finally, why did this great civilization decline? Theories range from climate change drying up the rivers to an invasion by Indo-Aryan tribes. The script might hold their own account of their end. What did the fish symbol really mean? Were the unicorn seals the mark of a powerful religious cult or a royal family? What was the name of the great city we call Mohenjo-Daro? And did the final inscriptions record a prayer for rain, a warning of invasion, or simply a last receipt for a bale of cotton? Number 14 was Europe's first writing a message to the gods. History usually begins in Sumer, in Mesopotamia, around 3400 BC. That is where we believe writing was first invented. But what if that is wrong? What if writing began a full 2,000 years earlier, not in the Middle East, but in the heart of Europe? In the Balkans, along the Danube River, a culture flourished in the Neolithic period, the New Stone Age. We call them the Vinča culture, named after a site near Belgrade, Serbia. They were not just simple farmers. They were a sophisticated people who lived in large, well-organized towns. They were skilled metallurgists, perhaps the first in the world to smelt copper. And from around 5500 BC, they started to scratch strange symbols onto their pottery and clay figurines. These are the Vinča symbols, sometimes called the Danube Valley script. We have found thousands of them. They are not just random doodles. They are a set of distinct signs that are used repeatedly across a wide geographical area, from modern-day Serbia to Romania, Bulgaria, and Greece. The symbols are abstract, consisting of zigzags, crosses, and swastika-like patterns. They are often found on the bottom of pots, or on small, carefully made clay figurines, usually of women. One of the most famous examples is the Despilio tablet, a wooden tablet found in a lake in northern Greece. It was dated to about 5260 BC, and is covered in these symbols. Wood rarely survives this long, so it is a remarkable find. The big question is, are these symbols a true writing system? If they are, it would be the oldest writing in the world by a huge margin. It would mean that writing was invented in Europe, by Stone Age farmers long before the great urban civilizations of the Middle East. It would completely upend our understanding of when and where human civilization took this monumental step. The main proponent of the idea that the Vinča symbols are writing was Marija Gimbutas, a Lithuanian-American archaeologist. She was a giant in her field, famous for her work on the Neolithic and Bronze Age cultures of Old Europe. She believed that the Vinča culture was part of a peaceful, matriarchal society that worshipped a mother goddess. She argued that the symbols were a form of script used for religious purposes. She saw them as part of a sacred language used in rituals. The inscriptions on the figurines, she thought, might be prayers or dedications to the goddess. However, most mainstream archaeologists and linguists are skeptical. They argue that the Vinča symbols do not meet the criteria for a true writing system. A writing system needs to be able to represent a full spoken language. It needs a clear grammar and syntax that allows for complex messages. The Vinča inscriptions are all very short. Just like the Indus script, we have no long texts. They are usually isolated symbols or small groups of symbols. This makes it impossible to identify the kind of grammatical patterns we would expect from a language. The critics suggest the symbols are simply proto-writing. They are not a full language, but a system of symbolic communication. They might be property marks indicating who owned a pot. They could be religious symbols with a general meaning, like a cross or a Star of David, but not spelling out specific words. They might be numerical notations or even parts of a calendar. The problem is, without any longer text or a bilingual key, we have no way of knowing. The culture that created these symbols vanished long before anyone who could read them came into contact with a literate society. Their language is completely unknown. If Marija Gimbutas was right, and this is writing, what could it tell us? It would give us a direct window into the minds of Neolithic people. What was important to them? Their religion, their economy, their social structure. Were they really a peaceful, goddess-worshipping society as Gimbutas proposed? Or was their world more complex? The symbols could be the names of gods and goddesses we have never heard of. They could be the words of hymns or prayers sung 5,000 years before the Bible was written. If they are just property marks, they still tell a story. They tell us about the dawn of private ownership and the beginnings of a complex economy among Europe's first farmers. The Dispilio tablet alone is tantalizing. What message was so important that it was carved onto a piece of wood 7,000 years ago? Are the Vinca symbols the world's first true writing, predating Sumer by millennia? Were they a sacred script used to communicate with a great goddess, or were they simply a way for a Stone Age potter to sign their work? And on the Dispilio tablet, are we looking at a poem, a prayer, a contract, or a shopping list? Number 13. What secret did the sea keep for 2,000 years? In 1908, an Italian archaeologist named Luigi Pernier was excavating the ruins of a Minoan palace on the island of Crete. The Minoans were a great Bronze Age civilization, the one that gave us the myth of the Minotaur and the labyrinth. In a storeroom that had been destroyed by fire, Pernier found a flat, circular disc of baked clay. It was about 15 centimeters in diameter and covered on both sides with a spiral of strange symbols. This was the Phaistos Disc. It is one of the most famous and baffling objects in archaeology. The disc is unique. Nothing else like it has ever been found. It dates to about 1700 BC. The symbols are not carved into the clay. They were pressed into it using pre-made stamps or seals. This means the Phaistos Disc is, in a way, the world's first example of printing with movable type. There are 241 symbols in total, arranged into groups separated by lines. There are 45 different types of symbols. They include pictures of a running man, a feathered headdress, a ship, a bird, and a cat. The spiral arrangement and the pictorial nature of the symbols make it look like a story, a board game, or a magical charm. The mystery of the Phaistos Disc is total. We do not know what it says. We do not know what language it is written in. We do not even know for sure where it was made. Although it was found in Crete, some scholars have argued that the symbols, particularly the feathered headdress, look more like they come from Anatolia, modern Turkey, or even Egypt. There have been countless attempts to decipher it. Linguists, both professional and amateur, have claimed to have cracked the code. They have proposed that it is written in Greek Hittite, a Semitic language, or a lost Minoan language. They have interpreted it as a hymn, a prayer, a legal document, a calendar, and an epic poem. The problem is that none of these decipherments can be proven. There is simply not enough text. With only 241 symbols, it is statistically possible to find patterns that seem to match almost any language you want to test. Without more examples of this script, we can never be sure. It is a statistical trap. The fact that it was made with stamps is also a puzzle. Why would someone go to the trouble of creating 45 separate stamps to produce just one object? It suggests that more objects like this were supposed to be made, but we have never found any. Was the Phaistos Disc a prototype, or was it a mass-produced item and all the others have been lost or are still waiting to be discovered? There is even a darker possibility. Some respected archaeologists have suggested that the Phaistos Disc might be a fake. They argue that Luigi Pernier, the discoverer, might have had it made to secure fame and funding. They point to the fact that the excavation records for the day it was found are not as detailed as they could be, and that the clay has never been subjected to thermoluminescence dating to confirm its age. The archaeological establishment, however, largely rejects this idea. The disc is almost universally accepted as a genuine Minoan artifact. If it is real, what could it be? Its spiral form is rare in ancient texts. It could be a hymn or a chant meant to be read aloud in a circle as part of a religious ritual. The symbols are grouped into words. Maybe it is a story, with each picture representing a key event. Perhaps it is a legal code, with each section outlining a law. The British linguist Gareth Owens has studied the disc for years and believes he has identified some sound values based on comparisons with other Minoan scripts, like Linear A. He thinks he has found words for goddess and mother, and suggests the disc is a prayer to a Minoan mother goddess. What language does the disc record, the lost tongue of the Minoan civilization? Was it a sacred text, a hymn to a goddess whose name we will never know? Why was it made with stamps, like a product from a printing press, and yet remains the only one of its kind? And could the most famous undeciphered text in the world actually be a brilliant modern forgery? Number 12. Why did a lost kingdom need 4 different ways to write? On the island of Cyprus in the Mediterranean, something strange happened in the Late Bronze Age. While most civilizations settle on one writing system, the people of ancient Cyprus seemed to use several. The island was a major hub for trade, a crossroads between Greece, Egypt, the Levant, and Anatolia. This cosmopolitan environment may have led to a complex linguistic situation. One of the scripts they used is called the Cypro-Minoan Syllabary. The name itself tells a story. It was named by the famous archaeologist Sir Arthur Evans, the man who excavated the Minoan palaces on Crete. He called it Cypro-Minoan because he believed it was a version of the Cretan script Linear A brought to Cyprus. It was used from about 1550 to 1050 BC. We have about 250 examples of it. Like the Indus script, the inscriptions are mostly short. They are found on clay tablets, pottery, and other objects. The problem with deciphering Cypro-Minoan is that it is not just one script. It is likely several. The French scholar Émile Masson, who did much of the foundational work on the script, divided it into 3, and possibly 4, distinct groups based on the style and location of the inscriptions. CM1 is the most common form. CM2 is found on a few large clay tablets from the city of Enkomi. CM3 is thought to have been used on the southern coast of the island. There is also a single unique tablet found in the ancient city of Ugarit in Syria, written in a variant of the script. We do not know if these different scripts represent different languages or just different stages of the same language. The underlying language or languages are unknown. Cyprus in the late Bronze Age was a melting pot. The population likely included native Cypriots whose language is lost, Greek-speaking Mycenaeans, and immigrants from the Near East. The Cypro-Minoan script could be recording any one of these languages or even multiple languages. Unlike Linear A, we do have a descendant of Cypro-Minoan that we can read. In the Iron Age, a new script appeared on Cyprus called the Cypriot Syllabary. In the 19th century, an English Assyriologist named George Smith managed to decipher it. He found a bilingual inscription in Phoenician and the Cypriot script at a site called Adalion. The key was realizing the script was used to write an early form of the Greek language. Because the Iron Age Cypriot syllabary is clearly derived from the Bronze Age Cypro-Minoan syllabary, we should be able to work backwards and figure out the older script. But it is not that simple. The scripts are similar, but not identical. We can guess the sound values of some Cypro-Minoan signs based on their later forms, but it is not enough to read the text. The language is the main barrier. If Cypro-Minoan was used to write an early form of Greek, like its descendant, then we should be able to make some sense of it. But it does not seem to work. The patterns of signs do not match the structure of Greek. This suggests the script was used to write a different non-Greek language, the lost native language of pre-Greek Cyprus. So what could these tablets tell us? They could reveal the lost language of ancient Cyprus. A whole new branch of a language family could be discovered. The tablets from Enkomi look like administrative records. They could give us a detailed picture of the economy of a major Bronze Age trading city. We could learn about its political structure, its international relations, and its daily life. We could find out what goods it imported and exported. We could learn about its religion. Some inscriptions are found on votive offerings to gods, so we might learn the names of the local Cypriot deities before they were merged with the Greek pantheon. The tablet from Ugarit is particularly important. Ugarit was a major city-state in Syria. The text could be a letter from a Cypriot king or merchant, giving us a direct insight into the international diplomacy and trade of the period. Why did this small island develop so many variations of one script? What was the original pre-Greek language of Cyprus, and what did it sound like? Are the large tablets from Enkomi the financial records of a Bronze Age corporation, or the state archives of a lost kingdom? And what does the letter sent to Syria say? Number 11. Who were America's first writers? For a long time, the Maya were thought to be the first civilization in the Americas to develop a true writing system. Their complex hieroglyphs recorded history, astronomy, and mythology, but in recent decades, evidence has emerged of even older writing systems. In the humid lowlands of Mexico's Gulf Coast, the Olmec civilization flourished from around 1500 to 400 BC. They are famous for carving colossal stone heads, but they may have also been the first writers in the New World. The evidence is scarce and controversial. The most important piece is a stone block known as the Cascajal block. It was discovered by road builders in a gravel pit in Veracruz, Mexico in the late 1990s, but its existence was only announced to the world in a 2006 issue of the journal Science. The block is about the size of a legal notepad and is inscribed with 62 symbols. Some are repeated. There are 28 distinct signs. They include images that look like insects, corn, a throne, and other objects from the Olmec world. The symbols are arranged in horizontal rows. The discoverers, including archaeologists Stephen D. Houston and Michael D. Coe, dated the block to around 900 BC. This would make it the oldest writing in the Americas by several hundred years. The discovery was explosive. If it is genuine writing, it means the Olmecs were even more sophisticated than we thought. They had not only monumental architecture and complex art, but also literacy. However, the Cascajal block is a major problem for archaeologists. First, it has no provenience. That is a technical term for its original location. It was found by road builders in a pile of gravel, not in a carefully controlled archaeological excavation. We cannot be sure it came from a 900 BC layer of soil. It could be much younger, or it could be a fake. Second, like the Phaistos Disc, it is unique. No other text in this specific script has ever been found. The symbols on the block do not seem to be direct ancestors of later Mesoamerican scripts like Maya or Zapotec. It appears and then vanishes. This is very strange. Writing systems usually evolve over time. They do not just pop into existence and then disappear. Third, the way the symbols are arranged is odd. Later Mesoamerican scripts are usually written in vertical columns or in a single line. The Cascajal block has horizontal rows, which some have argued is suspicious. Despite these doubts, many leading Mesoamerican scholars believe the block is authentic. The symbols show patterns and sequencing that suggest it is a real script. For example, certain pairs of signs appear frequently, as if they are part of a common word or phrase. The symbols themselves are also clearly in the Olmec artistic style. So what might it say? We have no idea what language the Olmecs spoke. We can make guesses based on later languages in the region, like the Mixozoian family of languages, but we cannot be sure. The text is too short to decipher. It could be a religious text, a list of tribute, a historical record, or a king's proclamation. The symbols themselves offer clues. One looks like a throne, suggesting it might be about royalty. Others look like food items, suggesting an economic record. It could be a sacred text related to a ritual. Given its small, portable size, it might have been used by a shaman or priest. The Cascajal block represents a huge question mark. It pushes back the origins of writing in the Americas, but it also creates a mystery. Why is there only one example? Was this a failed experiment in writing? Or was Olmec writing widespread, but recorded on perishable materials like wood or bark that have not survived in the tropical climate? If we could read it, we would hear the voice of the first great Mesoamerican civilization. We would know what their kings were called, what gods they worshipped, and how they saw their world. We could finally move beyond interpreting their culture through their art alone and read their own thoughts. Is the Cascajal block the key to a lost Olmec language or a clever modern hoax? If it is real, was it a sacred text for a shaman or a tax receipt for a farmer? And did the Olmecs write epic poems and histories on bark paper that have all rotted away, leaving us with just one silent stone? Number 10. How do you read a history written in dots? Not all writing uses ink or chisels. In the Andes Mountains of South America, the great Inca Empire built a vast, sophisticated state that stretched for thousands of miles. They built incredible cities like Machu Picchu and managed a complex economy. But they had no writing system in the way we usually think of it, or did they? The Incas used a unique and complex device called a quipu. A quipu is a collection of strings, usually made from cotton or alpaca wool. There is a main thick cord, and hanging from it are many smaller pendant cords. Knots are tied in these pendant cords at various positions. For a long time, we have known that quipus were used as accounting devices. The type of knot, its position on the cord, and even the color of the cord all represented information. They were a sophisticated system for recording numbers in a decimal system. The Spanish conquistadors who destroyed the Inca Empire in the 16th century reported that quipu keepers, called quipucamayokes, could read these knotted records and keep track of census data, tribute payments, and warehouse inventories. They were the spreadsheets of the Inca Empire, but could they be more than just numbers? Could the quipus also record stories, histories, and laws? This is the central debate. Most of the Spanish chroniclers believed they were only for accounting, but a few mentioned that they also contained historical narratives and messages. The problem was that the Spanish, in their effort to stamp out the native religion and culture, burned most of the quipus. Only about 600 to 1,000 survive today in museums around the world, and the knowledge of how to read them died with the last quipu Kumeyauk. The idea that some quipus might be narrative quipus has been gaining ground in recent years, largely thanks to the work of Harvard anthropologist Gary Urton. Urton has spent his career studying the quipus. He argues that they are a true three-dimensional writing system. He has created a massive database, the Quipu Database Project, to systematically record the details of every known quipu, the colors of the strings, the direction they are spun, the type of knot, the way the strings are attached to the main chord. He believes that these details, which go far beyond what is needed for just recording numbers, form a binary code similar to the zeros and ones of computer code. He suggests that with 7 binary choices like color, spin direction, etc., at each point on the string, there are 128 possible combinations, more than enough to represent a syllabic or logographic writing system. If Urton is right, the quipus are one of the most unique writing systems ever invented. It would mean that the Incas did have a way of recording their own history in their own words. The implications are enormous. Almost everything we know about the Incas was written by their Spanish conquerors. It is a history written by the victors, and it is inevitably biased. They portrayed the Incas as despotic rulers and their religion as idolatry. If we could read the narrative quipus, we could hear the Inca side of the story. We could read their own myths of creation, their own genealogies of kings, their own accounts of the Spanish invasion. It would be like discovering a library of books from a lost world. The challenge is immense, right? There is no Rosetta Stone for the quipu. The underlying language, Quechua, is still spoken by millions of people in the Andes. But we do not know how the knots and colors correspond to the sounds or words of the language. In 2017, a student of Urton's, Manny Medrano, made a potential breakthrough. By comparing a set of 6 quipus to a 17th century Spanish census document from the same region, he proposed that the way the strings were attached to the main chord might represent the social status of the people being counted. It is a small step, but it is the first time anyone has been able to convincingly match a feature of a quipu to a specific non-numerical meaning. Were the quipus just sophisticated calculators for Inca accountants, or are they a vast silent library of Inca literature and history, waiting for the right person to untangle their meaning? Could the color of a string tell us the name of a king and the type of knot describe his deeds? And hidden in a museum drawer, is there a quipu that tells the story of the fall of the Inca Empire from the point of view of those who lost everything? Number 9. What happened on a lost island at the end of the world? Easter Island, or Rapa Nui, is one of the most isolated inhabited places on Earth. It is a tiny speck of land in the middle of the Pacific Ocean, famous for its giant stone statues, the Moai. The story of Rapa Nui is often told as a cautionary tale of ecological collapse. A thriving Polynesian society, so the story goes, cut down all its trees to build bigger and bigger statues, leading to soil erosion, starvation, and warfare. But this story is based on archaeology and oral traditions. The people of ancient Rapa Nui left behind their own written records. We call their script Rongorongo, and it is completely undeciphered. Only about 24 objects inscribed with Rongorongo text survive. Most are wooden tablets, but the script is also found on a chieftain's staff and a birdman statue. The script itself is beautiful and mysterious. It consists of about 120 basic pictographic symbols representing humans, animals, plants, and geometric shapes. The writing is arranged in a system called reverse Boustrophedon. You read a line from left to right, then you turn the tablet upside down and read the next line, also from left to right. No other script in the world is read this way. The history of the Rongorongo tablets is tragic. When Europeans first visited the island in the 18th century, they made no mention of any writing. It was not until the 1860s that a Catholic missionary, Eugene Erod, reported that he had seen hundreds of the inscribed tablets in the islanders' homes. But by then, it was too late. In the 1860s, Peruvian slave raiders descended on the island and kidnapped a large portion of the population, including the king and the island's elite. It is believed that the people who knew how to read Rongorongo were among those taken. Diseases introduced by Europeans also devastated the remaining population. By the time anyone tried to systematically study the script, the knowledge was lost. The remaining islanders could not read the tablets. They said that the wise men who knew the school of Rongorongo were all dead. The oral traditions of the Rapa Nui people say that the script was brought to the island by their founding ancestor, Hotu Matua. This would make it an independent invention of writing, a rare event in human history. However, some scholars are skeptical. They point out that no one reported the script until after the Spanish had visited the island in 1770 and had the islanders sign a treaty of annexation. They suggest that the Rapa Nui people saw European writing and were inspired to create their own. This is called stimulus diffusion. If this is true, Rongorongo might be one of the most recent scripts to be invented. The dating of the tablets is difficult, but one has been carbon dated to the 15th century, long before European contact, which supports the idea of independent invention. Deciphering Rongorongo is a formidable task. The language it records is probably Rapa Nui, the Polynesian language still spoken on the island. This gives us a major advantage. But the script is complex. We do not know if it is a syllabary, where each symbol is a syllable, or a logography, where each symbol is a whole word. It is likely a mix of both. Many of the symbols look like things, which suggests they are logograms. But there are too few symbols for a purely logographic system like Chinese. What could the tablets tell us? Their contents are the subject of much speculation. Oral tradition calls them chants for chanting out. They could be religious texts, genealogies of kings, or navigational charts. One of the most famous tablets, called the Mamari tablet, seems to contain a lunar calendar. If we could read the others, we might finally get the Rapa Nui people's own account of their history. We could learn the real story behind the Moai statues. Who were they meant to represent? How were they moved? We could also learn what really happened to their environment. Was it a simple story of self-inflicted ecocide, or was the situation more complex, perhaps involving climate change or contact with Europeans? The tablets could be the ultimate primary source, a history of Easter Island written by the Easter Islanders. Was Rongorongo an ancient script brought by the first settlers, or a brilliant invention inspired by a brief glimpse of European writing? Do the tablets contain the sacred chants of the Birdman cult, or a sober account of the ecological disaster that befell the island? And what story is written on the wooden staff of a long-dead king? Number 8. What was the first great civilization of Iran? Long before the Persian Empire dominated the ancient world, another great civilization rose in the lands of modern-day Iran. They were the Elamites. Their kingdom Elam was one of the major powers of the ancient Near East, a contemporary and often a rival of the Sumerians, Akkadians, and Babylonians in neighboring Mesopotamia. The Elamites had a long and rich history, and they had their own unique writing system. Or rather, they had several. The earliest one is called Proto-Elamite. Proto-Elamite is one of the oldest undeciphered scripts in the world. It was used for a relatively brief period, from about 3100 to 2900 BC, at the very dawn of writing. It appeared in the city of Susa, the capital of Elam, at the same time that Proto-Cuneiform was developing in Mesopotamia. The two scripts look similar, and it is clear they are related. Proto-Elamite was probably inspired by the Sumerian invention. But it is not the same. The Elamites took the idea of writing and created their own system with their own unique symbols. We have about 1,600 tablets inscribed with Proto-Elamite. Almost all of them are administrative and economic texts. They are clay tablets that record transactions, numbers of sheep, jars of barley, quantities of goods. We can understand this part of the script, The numerical system is fairly clear. It is the signs for the words that are the problem. There are over 1,000 Proto-Elamite signs, which suggests the system is logographic, with each sign representing a whole word. This is too many signs for a syllabary or an alphabet. The language that Proto-Elamite records is almost certainly an early form of the Elamite language. The Elamite is a language isolate. It is not related to the Semitic languages of Mesopotamia like Akkadian, or the Indo-European languages that later dominated Iran like Persian. It is a unique language with a history of thousands of years. We can actually read later forms of Elamite. A later script called Linear Elamite was used around 2200 BC, and an even later version using the Mesopotamian cuneiform script was used for centuries. In fact, Elamite was one of the three languages inscribed on the famous Behistun inscription, the giant rock carving that was the key to deciphering cuneiform. So, if we can read later Elamite, why can't we read proto-Elamite? The problem is that the two scripts are separated by almost 1,000 years. The language would have changed significantly in that time, just as Old English is very different from modern English. Also, proto-Elamite is not a direct ancestor of the later cuneiform version of Elamite. It is a completely different script. We cannot easily map the sounds of later Elamite onto the signs of proto-Elamite. In recent years, a team of scholars led by Jacob Dahl at the University of Oxford has made significant progress. They have created high-quality images of all the known proto-Elamite tablets and made them available online. This has allowed researchers from around the world to collaborate. Using high-tech imaging, they can see the faint stylus marks more clearly than ever before. They have started to identify patterns. They can see that the tablets follow a strict format. They can identify signs for sheep and barley because they are always next to numbers. They are slowly, painstakingly building up a picture of the script. In 2020, a French archaeologist, Phaistos Disc, announced that he had made a major breakthrough in deciphering the sister script, Linear Elamite. If his decipherment is confirmed, it could provide the key to unlocking proto-Elamite. What would we learn? Since most of the tablets are economic, deciphering them fully would give us an incredibly detailed picture of the economy at the very birth of civilization. We could learn how the state was organized, how it collected taxes, and how it paid its workers. We could see the beginnings of bureaucracy. While we do not have any proto-Elamite texts that appear to be literature or history, we cannot be sure none exist. If we could decipher the scripts, we could look for them, we could find the Elamite names for their gods, their kings, and their cities. We could read the very first words ever written in Iran. Was proto-Elamite an independent invention, or was it borrowed from the Sumerians? How did this complex system of over 1,000 signs work? Do the tablets contain only records of grain and livestock, or are there hidden clues to the religion and politics of a civilization that was a rival to the first cities of Mesopotamia? And will Phaistos Disc's work on Linear Elamite prove to be the final key? Number 7. What does a single stone tell us about a lost civilization? Sometimes an entire lost writing system is known from just one single small object. This is the case with the Singapore stone. Today, Singapore is a bustling global metropolis, but its history goes back much further. In 1819, when the British founded the modern city, workers clearing the jungle at the mouth of the Singapore River found a huge slab of sandstone. It was about 3 meters high and 3 meters wide. The face of the stone was covered with about 50 lines of a script that no one could recognize. The stone became a local landmark. The local people did not know who had carved it or what it said. They had stories that it was placed there by a legendary strongman of the 14th century. For years, it sat on the riverbank. Scholars like Sir Stamford Raffles, the founder of Singapore, were fascinated by it. They tried to make copies of the inscription, but the stone was very weathered and the script was hard to read. Then, in 1843, the British colonial government decided to build a fort at the mouth of the river. The Singapore stone was in the way. In an act of what would today be considered unbelievable cultural vandalism, the colonial engineer, Captain D.H. Stevenson, ordered the stone to be blown up with gunpowder. The great inscription was shattered into hundreds of pieces. Most of the fragments were used as landfill or for building a road. A few pieces were saved by people who were horrified by the destruction. 3 of these fragments eventually made their way to museums. The largest is now on display at the National Museum of Singapore. It is a small piece of a much larger puzzle, a window into a history that was almost completely erased. The script on the Singapore stone has never been deciphered. The surviving fragments are too small. We have only a few dozen legible characters. From what we can see, the script looks like it could be related to ancient writing systems from Sumatra or Java, like Kawi or Old Javanese. The language it records is probably an old form of Malay or a related language. Based on the style of the script, scholars have tentatively dated the inscription to sometime between the 10th and 14th centuries. This was a time when the region was dominated by powerful maritime empires like the Srivijaya and the Majapahit. Singapore, then known as Temasek, was an important trading port. The stone was a large public monument. Its inscription was clearly meant to be read by many people. It was probably a proclamation, a legal text, or a historical record. It might have marked a great event or laid out the laws of the port. It might have been a curse to ward off enemies. Whatever it was important. You do not carve 50 lines of text onto a massive boulder for a trivial reason. The loss of the Singapore stone is a tragedy. If it had survived intact, we would almost certainly be able to read it. There would be enough text to compare with other known scripts and languages from the region. It would be a priceless historical document, one of the earliest records from Singapore. It would tell us about the kingdom that ruled the island before the British arrived. It would give us the names of its rulers and perhaps its laws. It would be a direct voice from Singapore's pre-colonial past. Instead, we are left with a few silent fragments. They are a powerful symbol of how easily history can be lost. They remind us that what we know about the past is often based on the chance survival of a few objects. The story of the Singapore stone is not just about an undeciphered script, it is about the destruction of knowledge. What did the full inscription on the Singapore stone say? Was it a royal decree from a lost king of Temasek, or a treaty between local rulers and foreign traders? Could it have been a simple boundary marker, or a complex epic poem? And how many other such inscriptions, how many other lost histories lie buried under the modern cities of the world? Number 6. Who lived in Crete before the Minoans? The island of Crete has given us many mysteries. The Phaistos Disc is one. The undeciphered linear A script is another. But there is an even older and more mysterious form of writing from the island. It is called Cretan hieroglyphics. This script was used in Crete from about 2100 to 1700 BC in the early period of the Minoan Civilization. It predates Linear A, although the two scripts were used at the same time for a while before the hieroglyphs fell out of use. The name hieroglyphics was given to it by Sir Arthur Evans because the symbols are pictorial, like Egyptian hieroglyphs. They are pictures of things human body parts like eyes and hands, animals like cats and birds, ships, weapons, and tools. But the script is not related to the Egyptian system. It is a unique local invention. We have about 300 examples of Cretan hieroglyphics. That is not very many. Most of the inscriptions are very short. They are found on clay tablets and bars used for administration, but most famously, they are found on seals. These seals, carved from stone or ivory, are beautiful objects. The hieroglyphic inscriptions on them are often works of art in themselves. The most important collection of Cretan hieroglyphs comes from the Palace of Malea. A deposit of clay documents, known as the Malea Archives, was found there. It seems to be the records of a palace bureaucracy. Another key artifact is a stone altar from Malea, which has a longer inscription running around its top. Like Linear A, we do not know what language Cretan hieroglyphics records. It is almost certainly the same unknown Minoan language. Since we cannot read Linear A, we cannot read the hieroglyphs either. The two scripts have some symbols in common, but they are distinct systems. The hieroglyphic script has about 90 to 100 signs. This number suggests it is probably a syllabary, where each sign represents a syllable, like ka, to ro. This is a similar number of signs to Linear B, the later deciphered Cretan script used for writing Greek. The challenge is the same as with all these lost scripts. There is no bilingual text. The inscriptions are too short. The underlying language is unknown. We can make some guesses. We can see that the script was used for accounting. We can identify signs for numbers and for certain commodities like wine and olives based on the context of the administrative tablets. But we cannot read the words. We cannot get past the numbers and lists to the actual language. What could the hieroglyphs tell us that Linear A could not? They are older. They come from the very beginning of the Minoan Palace civilization. They could tell us about the origins of this remarkable culture. Who were the first rulers of the great palaces at Knossos and Malea? What were their names? The seals are particularly intriguing. They are small and personal. They were probably used to mark ownership or to sign documents. The inscriptions on them might be people's names or titles. If we could read them, we could reconstruct the names of the Minoan people, the elite of this society. The Malea altar is our best hope for a longer text. Is its inscription a dedication to a god? A prayer? The name of a king who commissioned it? It is a religious text of some kind, and it could reveal the name of a major Minoan deity. The pictorial nature of the symbols is also a clue. Why did the Minoans choose to represent their language with pictures of cats, ships, and human hands? The choice of symbols tells us what was important in their world. What language did the first Minoan kings speak? Are the names of the Minoan elite carved into the beautiful stone seals they used every day? And what prayer is written on the stone altar at the Palace of Malia? Number 5, what was written on the walls of a Canaanite temple? The city of Byblos on the coast of modern-day Lebanon is one of the oldest continuously inhabited cities in the world. It was a major center for the trade of papyrus, and the Greek word for book, biblion, comes from its name. It was at the crossroads of Egypt and Mesopotamia, and it was a place of great innovation. It is here that the Phoenician alphabet, the ancestor of our own alphabet, was developed. But before the Phoenicians, the people of Byblos used a different and still undeciphered writing system. This is the Byblos syllabary. It is a strange and enigmatic script. We only have about 10 inscriptions in this script. They were all found at Byblos, and they date to the Middle Bronze Age, somewhere between 1800 and 1500 BC. The inscriptions are on stone stelae and on bronze spatulas. The most famous is a large stone block with 10 lines of text. The script has about 100 signs. This number, like with Cretan hieroglyphics, strongly suggests it is a syllabary. Many of the signs seem to be derived from Egyptian hieroglyphs, but they have been simplified and adapted. It is a unique system. For a long time, the Byblos syllabary was seen as a possible link between Egyptian hieroglyphs and the later Phoenician alphabet. It looked like a missing link, an experimental script that was part of the long process of developing alphabetic writing. However, this idea has largely been abandoned. The script is now seen as a dead end, a local invention that was used for a few centuries and then replaced by the much more efficient Phoenician alphabet. There have been several attempts to decipher the script. In the 1940s, a French scholar named Edouard Dorme claimed to have deciphered it. He proposed that it was used to write a Semitic language, like Phoenician. His work was very influential for a time. But other scholars were never fully convinced. They could not use his system to produce consistent readings of the texts. More recently, a scholar named Jan Best has also proposed a decipherment, linking the script to Linear A. This is also not widely accepted. The script remains officially undeciphered. The main problem is the tiny amount of material. With only 10 inscriptions, it is very hard to make progress. There is not enough data to do a proper frequency analysis or to identify all the signs. We need more text. It is very likely that the script was also written on perishable materials like papyrus, which have not survived. The few inscriptions we have are just the monumental and ceremonial uses of a script that might have been more common. What could these 10 short texts tell us? They are from a crucial time and place. This was the period when the alphabet was being invented in the Sinai and Canaan. The Byblos syllabary is part of that story. If we could read it, we would understand more about this great intellectual leap. We would know what language the people of Byblos spoke before the Phoenicians. It was almost certainly a Semitic language. But which one? The inscriptions themselves seem to be monumental. They are on display in what was probably a temple or palace. They are likely royal or religious texts. They could contain the names of the kings of Byblos from a period for which we have no records. They could be hymns to Canaanite gods like Baal or Astarte. They could give us a glimpse into the religion and politics of a major Bronze Age city-state. Was the Byblos syllabary a failed experiment on the road to the alphabet? What language does it record, and what are the names of the kings who commissioned these stone inscriptions? Are the bronze spatulas recipes for a ritual or a record of a royal gift? And are there more examples of this script lying buried beneath the ancient city? Number 4. Who were the people of the burnt city? In the rugged highlands of eastern Iran, on the edge of the Great Lut Desert, lies an archaeological site called Shar-e-Sukte, which means the burnt city. This was the site of a large and complex Bronze Age city that flourished between 3200 and 1800 BC. It was a hub of trade connecting Mesopotamia with the civilizations of the Indus Valley in Central Asia. You know, the people of this city were skilled artisans. They produced beautiful pottery and intricate metalwork. And they used a writing system that we have not yet deciphered. This script is known as Linear Elamite. It should not be confused with the much older Proto-Elamite. Linear Elamite appeared much later, around 2300 BC, during the reign of a powerful Elamite king named Puzur in Shushanak. You know, it seems to have been created as a distinct national script for the Elamite language, perhaps to replace the foreign cuneiform script that was also used in Elam at the time. We have very few examples of linear Elamite. For a long time, only about 24 inscriptions were known. They were found at the Elamite capital of Susa. They include inscriptions on stone monuments, on clay tablets, and on a silver vase. The script has about 80 to 100 signs, so it is probably a syllabary or an alphabet. It is written from right to left. The scarcity of text made decipherment seem impossible. For decades, the script was a complete mystery. The breakthrough came very recently. Over the last few years, a French archaeologist named Phaistos Disc has been working on a collection of linear Elamite inscriptions found on a set of silver beakers. These beakers, which came from a private collection, had very repetitive texts on them, probably the names of kings and gods. This was a huge help. Repetitive texts allow you to identify the signs for the same names. In late 2020, Disc announced that he and his team had succeeded in deciphering linear Elamite. The announcement made headlines around the world. He said he had managed to identify the sound values for almost all the signs. According to him, the script is a purely phonetic system, an alphabet or a semi-syllabary, which would make it one of the oldest of its kind in the world. He read the names of several Elamite kings and gods. The full details of his decipherment have not yet been published in a peer-reviewed academic journal, so the wider scholarly community is still waiting to assess his claims. If he is right, it will be one of the great decipherment stories of the 21st century, like the cracking of Maya hieroglyphs in the 20th. If linear Elamite is truly deciphered, what will it unlock? It will give us access to the Elamite language in its own native script. We will be able to read the monuments of the Elamite kings as they intended them to be read. We will learn more about their history, their religion, and their society. The most famous inscription is on a monument called the Table of the Lion. A decipherment could finally tell us what this grand royal inscription is about. We could also get a better understanding of the relationship between linear Elamite and the older proto-Elamite. Disc believes the two scripts are related, and that his decipherment of the younger script will be the key to the older one. This would open up an even earlier period of Iranian history. It would be a major step in understanding a civilization that for too long has stood in the shadow of its more famous neighbors. Has Phaistos Disc really cracked the code of linear Elamite? What does the Great Table of the Lion monument actually say? And will this breakthrough finally allow us to read the 2,000-year-old proto-Elamite script and hear the voices from the dawn of Iranian civilization? Number 3, what does a message from a lost empire say? In the highlands of southern Mexico, the Zapotec civilization flourished for over 1,000 years, from about 500 BC to 900 AD. Their great capital was Monte Alban, a city of temples and palaces built on a flattened mountaintop. The Zapotecs were contemporaries of the Maya, but they had their own distinct culture and they had their own writing system. It is the oldest confirmed writing system in Mesoamerica, appearing even before the Maya script. We have several hundred examples of Zapotec writing. They are carved on stone monuments, lintels, and stelae. The script is hieroglyphic. The signs, or glyphs, are pictures of things, but they represent sounds as well as ideas. And it is a logosyllabic system like the Maya script. The inscriptions are often accompanied by numbers from the Zapotec calendar, which was a sophisticated system similar to the Maya calendar. We can understand parts of the Zapotec inscriptions. We can read the dates. The calendar system is well understood. We can also identify the glyphs for certain places and things. The glyph for Monte Alban, for example, is a stylized hill. We can also identify personal names. The inscriptions often seem to list rulers and the places they conquered. A famous set of carvings at Monte Alban, known as the danzantes or dancers, show contorted figures. For a long time they were thought to be dancers, but scholars now believe they are images of slain and mutilated war captives. The hieroglyphs next to them are probably their names or the names of their cities. But we cannot read the script in its entirety, we cannot read the verbs or understand the grammar. The main problem is the language. The Zapotec language is still spoken today by hundreds of thousands of people in Oaxaca, Mexico. But there are many different dialects, and the language has changed a lot over the last 2,000 years. It is very difficult to reconstruct the ancient form of the language that the script records. Another problem is that the script itself changed over time. The early script from 500 BC is different from the later script from 800 AD. It is a long and continuous tradition of writing, but it is not static. Scholars like Javier Ursid at Brandeis University have spent their careers trying to document and understand this evolution. If we could fully decipher Zapotec writing, we would open a new chapter in the history of Mesoamerica. The Maya have dominated our view of the region because we can read their texts. We know the names of their kings, the dates of their battles, and the details of their mythology. The Zapotecs are still largely silent. Their monuments are covered in writing, but we cannot read the story. We could learn the history of the Zapotec kingdom, a dynasty that lasted for over a millennium. We could read their own accounts of their wars and their diplomacy. We could learn about their religion and their worldview. We could understand the political history of Monte Alban, one of the great cities of the ancient Americas. The inscriptions are a massive untapped source of historical information. Who were the captives depicted in the Danzantes carvings, and what is the full story of their defeat? What are the names of the great kings who ruled from the mountaintop city of Monte Alban? And what do the longer inscriptions in their tombs and on their temples say about their gods and their beliefs? Number 2, was there another empire in ancient Mexico? The history of ancient Mesoamerica is often seen as a story of the Olmecs, the Maya, the Zapotecs, and finally the Aztecs. But what if there was another major player whose writing we cannot read? In the region of the Isthmus of Tehuantepec in Mexico, a script flourished for a few centuries around the time of Christ. It is called the Isthmian script, or the Epi-Olmec script. We have only a handful of examples of this script. The most important is the La Mochara Stela one. This is a large stone monument that was pulled out of the Aquila River in 1986. It is a remarkable object. It has a long portrait of a ruler in elaborate dress, and next to him are over 400 glyphs of the Isthmian script, one of the longest texts ever found from ancient Mesoamerica. The text also includes 2 dates in the long count calendar, corresponding to the years 143 AD and 156 AD. The Isthmian script is very complex and sophisticated. It looks a bit like Maya script, but it is different. It is clearly a fully developed writing system, capable of recording complex information. Another key text is the Tuxtla statuette, a small stone figure of a man in a duck-like mask, which has a few Isthmian glyphs and a calendar date from 162 AD. In the 1990s, 2 linguists, John Justison and Terence Kaufman, proposed a decipherment of the Isthmian script. They argued that the script records an ancient form of a language from the Mixozoquian family. This is the same language family that many believe the Olmecs spoke. Using their proposed decipherment, they offered a full translation of the La Mochara Stela. They said it recorded the life and battles of a warrior king named Harfster Mountain Lord. Their work was hailed as a major breakthrough. It was published in the journal Science, and for a while it seemed that the Isthmian script was no longer undeciphered. However, in the years since, serious doubts have been raised about their decipherment. Other scholars, notably Stephen Houston and Michael Coe, have argued that Justison and Kaufman's methods were flawed. They pointed out that there were inconsistencies in the decipherment and that it did not work when applied to newly discovered shorter Isthmian texts. The debate is still ongoing, but today most Mesoamerican scholars consider the Isthmian script to be, once again, undeciphered. The Justison and Kaufman proposal is seen as a brilliant but unproven hypothesis. The problem, as always, is the lack of material. We have one very long text and a few very short ones. It is not enough to confirm a decipherment. We need to find another long Isthmian text. If a new monument were discovered, we could test the Justison-Kaufman decipherment. If it worked on the new text, it would be proven. If not, it would be disproven. What is at stake? The La Mochara Stela is a history book written in stone. It tells the story of a ruler and his kingdom. If we could read it with certainty, we would discover a whole new civilization. We would learn about a kingdom that existed in the period between the decline of the Olmecs and the rise of the classic Maya. The text seems to be a detailed historical narrative. It would give us an unparalleled insight into the politics and warfare of this lost kingdom. It would be like discovering a new chapter of the Anglo-Saxon Chronicle. The Isthmian script holds the key to the history of a people who have been lost to us. Are Justison and Kaufman right? And is the La Mochara Stela the biography of a king named Harvester Mountain Lord? Or does the long inscription tell a completely different story that we have yet to understand? And what other stone monuments covered in the history of this forgotten kingdom still lie at the bottom of the rivers of Mexico? Number 1. What did the Minoans write on their shopping lists? We return to Crete. Of all the undeciphered scripts, perhaps the most tantalizing is Linear A. It is the writing of the great Minoan civilization which flourished on Crete from about 2600 to 1450 BC. This was the civilization of the Palace of Knossos, of the bull-leaping frescoes, of the legends of King Minos and the labyrinth. The Minoans were a major power in the Bronze Age Mediterranean. They had a sophisticated culture and a wide-ranging trade network. And from about 1800 BC, they wrote things down using a script we call Linear A. The name was given by its discoverer, Sir Arthur Evans. He called it linear because it was written in lines unlike the earlier pictorial Cretan hieroglyphics. He called it A to distinguish it from a later script found at Knossos, which he called Linear B. The great success story of Aegean archaeology is the decipherment of Linear B. In 1952, a brilliant young English architect and amateur linguist named Michael Ventris proved that Linear B was used to write an early form of the Greek language. This was a stunning discovery. It pushed the history of the Greek language back by hundreds of years and showed that Greek-speaking people, the Mycenaeans, were in control of Knossos in its final phase. The decipherment of Linear B should have been the key to Linear A. The two scripts share many of the same symbols. About 80% of the signs in Linear A have a corresponding sign in Linear B. So we can read Linear A, we can substitute the sound values from Linear B onto the Linear A signs. The problem is that when we do this, the result is not Greek. It is not any known language. The words that emerge are unpronounceable and do not match any language family we know of. The language of the Minoans, the language recorded in Linear A, is lost. We have about 1,500 examples of Linear A. Most of them are clay tablets and are, like so many other ancient texts, administrative records. They are lists of commodities, jars of wine, quantities of grain, numbers of livestock. They are the accounting records of the Minoan palaces. We can understand the numbers and the logograms for things like win, figs, and mon, but we cannot read the actual words. We can see a list of names next to numbers, but we do not know what the names are. Some inscriptions are not administrative. They are found on stone offering tables and other religious objects from mountain peak sanctuaries. These are likely religious texts, dedications to Minoan gods or goddesses. These are our best hope for understanding Minoan religion from their own words. But again, we can transliterate the sounds, but the words are meaningless to us. What language was it? Theories abound. Some scholars have tried to link it to Semitic languages from the Near East, or to Anatolian languages like Luwian from modern-day Turkey. Others suggest it is related to a pre-Indo-European language from the Aegean. None of these theories have been proven. The Minoan language remains an isolate. If we could decipher Linear A, the prize would be immense. We would finally hear the voice of the Minoan people. We could learn the real name of their island, what they called themselves. We could learn the names of their kings and queens. Most importantly, we could learn the names of their gods and goddesses. The religious texts from the peak sanctuaries could be hymns or prayers. We could finally move beyond interpreting their religion through their artsy the snake goddesses, the double axes, and read their actual religious beliefs. Even the boring administrative lists are a treasure trove. They contain personal names. We could reconstruct the names of hundreds of Minoan people, from palace officials to farm laborers. It would bring a whole civilization back to life. What was the language of King Minos, and what family of languages does it belong to? What were the names of the gods to whom the Minoans made offerings on their mountain shrines? And on a humble clay tablet from a palace storeroom, what was the name of the person who signed out 3 jars of wine and a basket of figs over 3,000 years ago?